The drive-in is the part I want to get right, because it's the only stretch of the day that's still ordinary, and ordinary is what I need you to feel before everything else. So, I'm going to take a moment with it. The A470 north of Brecon is empty on a Saturday in February. There's frost in the verges that hasn't burned off, because the sun hasn't really come up. It's that gray low light Wales has from November to March, where the sky is the same color as the road, and the only thing with color is the bracken. I'm in my partner's Yaris because the van's MOT lapsed and I haven't dealt with it. I have a flask of tea that's already gone tepid, a Greg's sausage roll wrapper folded into the door pocket, and the postcode written on the back of an envelope from the council because my phone keeps losing signal in the valleys. The job is straightforward. My Aunt Mayer died 11 days ago. I hadn't seen her in 9 years. She lived alone in a stone 2 up, 2 down, off a single-track road above Lanarded Wells, the kind of road where you have to back up half a mile if you meet another car, and you mostly don't meet another car. The solicitor told my mother, and my mother told me. And because I do this for a living, bereavement cleanouts, house clearances, the soft and unpleasant work of going into a dead person's home and sorting what they left behind into bags for the family, bags for the charity shop, and bags for the tip, it fell to me. Mom can't drive that far. My sister won't go. There's a surveyor coming Monday morning from the bank that holds the small mortgage Mayer never finished paying, and the house has to be empty enough to walk through. I have the keys in an envelope on the passenger seat. There are 2 of them on a brass ring with a wooden fob shaped like an acorn, varnished dark, the kind of thing you'd buy in a craft fair in 1986. I haven't grieved. I don't really know how to. Mayer was my father's older sister, and my father has been dead for 16 years, and the connection thinned years ago into Christmas cards with a 5-pound note for me and my sister until we were too old for that, and then it just stopped. I remember her voice, Welsh, sharper than my dad's, with that particular dry humor Welsh women have where you can't tell if they like you. And I remember her hands, which were always cold, and I remember a smell of lavender and damp wool. That's it. That's 9 years of nothing, and 40 years of an aunt I never properly had. I turn off the A483 at Lanarded, and the road climbs. There are sheep on the road. I crawl past them. The sat-nav loses signal about a mile in, and I drive on the envelope. Past a chapel, past a farm gate with no farm visible behind it. Past a stand of larch that has been logged and the stumps left to weather, and then the road dips, and there it is. A stone house at the end of a long flagstone path with a wooden gate set back from the road behind a hawthorn hedge that hasn't been cut in maybe 3 years. The slate roof is dark with damp. There's a chimney at the south end and a smaller one at the north. The windows are the small sash kind with 12 panes each, and they're dark because nobody lives here. I sit in the car for a moment with the engine off, and I look at the house and I think, this is the only thought I have, and I want to remember it later. That's a perfectly ordinary house. I get out. It's cold, but not freezing. There's a smell of wet stone and wood smoke from somewhere down the valley, which surprises me, because there shouldn't be anyone burning anything within a mile. But smoke carries. The gate sticks, and I have to lift it on its hinges. The flagstone path is mossy and uneven, and I have to watch my feet. There's a small front garden, mostly overgrown, with the brown stalks of last summer's hollyhocks bent over and rotting against the wall. The front door is painted a dark green, the color the National Trust uses, and it has a brass knocker shaped like a fox. I notice the fox because it's slightly cocked to one side, hanging off true. I don't think about it. I try the larger of the 2 keys. It turns. The door opens inward with that particular complaint stone houses make. The air pressure changes. You feel it in your ears, and there's a soft thump of cold air meeting your face. The smell hits me. Lavender, faint and damp wool, and underneath that, the smell of a house that's been closed for 11 days with the heating off in February. Cold mineral. The smell of a tomb, if I'm being honest, but I've done this job for 6 years, and every empty house smells like a tomb. That's not a metaphor. That's a fact about empty houses. I stand in the hall, and I let my eyes adjust. The hall is narrow flagstone floor, a coat rack on the right, with a green wax jacket hanging on it, and a flat cap on the top hook. A barometer on the wall to the left, the brass kind with a dial, and the needle is sitting on change. A small console table under the barometer, with a wooden bowl on it, containing 1 Yale key, 3 2-pence pieces, a hair clip, and a folded receipt. On the far wall at the end of the hall, maybe 15 feet in, there's a door, white-painted, that I assume leads to the kitchen. To my immediate left is the front room, sitting room, parlor, whatever she called it, and to my immediate right is a smaller room, the dining room. A staircase rises along the right-hand wall to the first floor, and underneath the staircase is a small understairs door with a black iron latch. I do the thing I always do on a first walkthrough. I leave the front door open, propped with a shoe from the rack, because old houses are full of dust and I want air. I put my keys back in my jacket pocket. I go through the ground floor first to get a sense of the volume of stuff. I do this with a pen and a small notebook because I'm old-fashioned and because my phone is dead anyway. The sitting room is on my left. Floral wallpaper, faded, 2 armchairs facing a fireplace that hasn't been used in a long time. The grate has cold ash in it and a folded newspaper from 2019. A piano against the back wall, upright, with framed photographs along the top. I look at them. Mare as a girl in a school uniform with her brother. My father, in shorts, both of them squinting into a 1960s sun. Mare in her 30s at someone's wedding. Mare holding a baby that I think might be me. I don't know. There's a photo of 2 women on a beach in what looks like the 80s, arms around each other. I look at it for a long time. I don't know who the other woman is. Nobody ever mentioned a woman. I put it down. The sitting room is fine. There's a Welsh dresser against the side wall with china on it, and a sideboard with sherry glasses in it, and the carpet is patterned in a way I associate with my grandmother. It's all just an old woman's sitting room. I make a note. Parlor. China to charity, piano to clearance, photographs to mum. The dining room is on the right, smaller. A round table, 4 chairs, a sideboard with 3 drawers I'll get to later. A grandfather clock against the wall that stopped at 4:17. I check my watch. It's 10:42. The clock has just stopped. Most of them are. The cord and weights are still hanging, but the pendulum is still. I make a note. Clock, clearance, check value first. I go down the hall to the door at the end. The kitchen, and a stone flagged again, a Belfast sink, a Rayburn cooker that's stone cold, a small wooden table with 2 chairs, a window over the sink looking out at the back garden, which slopes up to a stone wall, and beyond that to bracken and the side of the hill. A back door to the left of the sink, half glazed, with a key in the lock on the inside. I try the back door handle just to check, and it's locked, but the key turns and the door opens onto a stone step and a small yard with a coal bunker and a wheelie bin. I close it and turn the key back. There's a calendar on the kitchen wall from the Lanreded Wells Show, 2024, hung on a nail, with the page turned to February. The Saturday I'm standing in is circled in biro. I look at that for a moment. The circle is neat. I think maybe she had a doctor's appointment, or maybe she was expecting someone. Then I remember she's been dead 11 days, and she circled a date in her own future and didn't know. And that's the first small uncomfortable thing of the day. But it's a normal uncomfortable thing, the kind every clearance has. Dead people leave plans in their kitchens. That's just what they do. I go back to the hall and I open the understairs door. It's a cupboard, as I expected. Coats, boots, an upright Hoover from probably 1995, a tin of brass polish, a torch. I shut it. I climb the stairs. The first floor has 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. Her bedroom is at the front, above the sitting room, with a double bed neatly made. She made her bed the morning she died, the solicitor had said, and the cleaner came in and found her on the kitchen floor and the bed still made, and a wardrobe and a dresser. The second bedroom is at the back and smaller, used for storage. Boxes, a sewing machine, a single bed under a dust sheet. The bathroom is between them, avocado green suite, mid-70s, a frosted window. I do my walkthrough. I make my notes. I come back down. The whole thing takes maybe 35 minutes. I stand in the hall and I think 1.5 days, 2 at the most. I'll do the kitchen and the dining room today, the bedrooms tomorrow, and I'll be home for Sunday dinner. The job is small. The ant was tidy. There's nothing to fight here. I bring the flat pack boxes in from the car. I bring the bin bags. I bring the labels and the marker pens. I prop them in the hall. The front door is still open. I can see the Yaris on the verge through it, and a wedge of gray sky, and the gate I came through. I shut the front door finally, because it's cold, and I'm going to be working, and I turn back to the dining room to start on the sideboard drawers, because that's where the paperwork usually is, and paperwork is the thing the surveyor cares about. This is the moment I want you to mark, because it's the last moment of the day that is just a day. I open the top drawer of the dining room sideboard. It contains, in this order, a bundle of bank statements from Lloyd's tied with garden string, a checkbook with 3 checks left, a service booklet for a Vauxhall Astra, a letter from the surgery confirming an appointment for the 22nd, 3 days from now, and a small black address book with a brass clasp. I sit down at the dining table to look through them properly. The chair is wooden, hard. The sideboard light is a small bulb under a dusty shade, and the room is dim. And so I get up and go back to the hall and turn on the hall light. Then come back and sit down again and start on the bank statements. I am 30 pages into the bank statements when the smell changes. It's slight. The lavender thins, and underneath it, I can suddenly smell soup. Vegetable soup, leek and potato, I'd say. Specifically, the smell of leek and potato soup that's just past the point of starting to cook. That warm, starchy onion smell. It's coming from the kitchen. I sit very still and I think, and I want to be careful here. I want to be honest about exactly what I thought. I think the Rayburn's gone on. And then I think, the Rayburn was cold and there's no gas connection, it's oil, and the tank outside was empty when I looked, so the Rayburn cannot have gone on. And then I think, something has been left on a hob. Oh, electric maybe? And I haven't checked the hob. I get up. I walk down the hall to the kitchen. I push the kitchen door open. The kitchen is empty. The Rayburn is cold. I put my hand on it to be sure. The electric hob in the corner. A small 2-ring baby belling on the worktop next to the sink, which I had clocked earlier, is off. There is nothing on the worktop. There is no pan on any surface. The smell is there, distinct, soup, and there is nothing producing it. I open the fridge. The fridge contains, as it did when I checked an hour ago, half a pint of milk gone solid, a block of cheese in greaseproof paper, 2 tomatoes, and a foil-wrapped piece of something I'm not opening. No soup, no leek, no potato, I open the freezer above. Frost, peas, a pack of mints. No soup. I stand in the kitchen and I sniff. I move my head. The smell is everywhere in the kitchen, evenly distributed. The way a smell is when it's been cooking for 10 minutes, rather than just appeared. There is no localized source. After about a minute, it begins to fade. After 2 minutes, it's gone, and the lavender comes back, and the cold mineral smell of the empty house comes back, and the kitchen is what it was. I make a note in my notebook. I write, kitchen, phantom smell of soup at 11:30 approximately. Check chimney for nest? Damp? I write this because I am the kind of person who writes things down when I don't understand them, because I find it calming, and because in 6 years of doing this job, I have smelled all sorts of things in dead people's houses, and there is almost always a rational explanation. A fridge unplugged for a week, a bin under a sink, a dead mouse in a cavity, a neighbor's extractor fan venting next door. The smell of soup is more unusual. Soup needs ingredients, heat, and a pan. But I tell myself there's a rational explanation I haven't found yet, and I go back to the dining room. I work on the sideboard for another 40 minutes. I find more paperwork, a stack of birthday cards she'd kept, some unopened mail, a postcard from someone called Bethan from a place called Tenby with no date on it. I make piles. I make notes. I am calm, and the calm is real, because most of the day is calm, and most of the day is dull, and most of the day is what it appears to be. At 12:15 by my watch, I get up to make a cup of tea. I have brought my own kettle in a plastic bag because I never use the dead person's kitchen. It's a rule of mine, soft but consistent, in partly hygiene and partly something I don't have a word for. I take the kettle to the kitchen, fill it from the cold tap which runs brown for about 10 seconds, and then clears, and I plug it into the socket by the door. While it boils, I lean in the kitchen doorway and look down the hall toward the front door. The barometer needle, I notice, has moved. It was on change when I came in. It's now on rain. This is not strange. Barometers move. The weather is in fact changing. The sky outside has dimmed another shade. I note it idly. The understairs door is open. I look at it for a moment. I closed it. I know I closed it. I closed it because the latch on it is the loud iron kind, and I remember the noise it made when I shut it. That solid clack. But it is open now, by maybe 4 inches, and inside the cupboard the coats are visible, and the hoover, and the boots. I think the latch is old and it didn't catch. I walk down the hall and I shut the door again, properly, hearing the clack, and I push on it to make sure it's caught. It's caught. I go back to the kitchen. The kettle has clicked off. I make my tea. I take it back to the dining room. I work through lunch. I eat the second half of my sausage roll standing up at the dining table, and I drink my tea, and I move from the sideboard to the Welsh dresser in the sitting room, and I begin pulling china down, wrapping it in newspaper, packing it into a box. The work is rhythmic. The light through the sitting room window is gray and even. There's a clock somewhere, not the grandfather clock which is stopped, making a thin tick, and I locate it eventually as a small carriage clock on the mantelpiece that I hadn't registered before. I check my watch against it. They agree. It's 1:20. It's at 1:43 that I look up because something has registered in my peripheral vision, and I haven't consciously processed it yet. And I turn my head toward the sitting room doorway, and I see that the hall, visible through the doorway, looks slightly wrong, and it takes me maybe 3 seconds to understand what is wrong. The barometer is on the wrong wall. It was on the left as I came in. It is now on the right. The console table, the wooden bowl, all of it. They are on the right-hand side of the hall now, opposite the coat rack, which is also on the wrong side. The coat rack with the green wax jacket and the flat cap is on the left. The whole hall has been mirrored. I stand in the doorway of the sitting room with a teacup wrapped in newspaper in my hand, and I look at the hall, and I think, and again, I want to be exact about what I thought. I think I'm misremembering. I think I came in disoriented. I noted the wrong side. I'm just now correcting it. I do not yet think anything else, because what else is there to think? I put the teacup down on the side table, and I walk into the hall, and I look at the coat rack, and I look at the barometer, and I look at the bowl with the keys, and they are all where they are, and the front door is at the end of the hall behind me, and the kitchen door is at the end of the hall in front of me, and I cannot tell any more which side of the house I am facing. I go to the front door. I put my hand on the handle. I open it, and the door opens onto the garden. The path, the gate, the Yaris on the verge, the hedge, everything is where it was. I am facing the road. The sun, what there is of it, is over my right shoulder. I came in from the south, and the south is to my right, which means I am facing west, which means the coat rack should be on the south wall of the hall, which is, I turn around to look, the right-hand wall. The coat rack is on the right-hand wall. The barometer is on the left-hand wall. That's wrong. They were the other way around a minute ago. I am sure of this. I am sure with the certainty of someone who works in other people's houses and notes where things are because the noting is part of the work. I close the front door. I stand in the hall. The hall is, as far as I can determine, now arranged the way it was when I came in, and the coat rack is on the right. The barometer is on the left. The console table with the bowl is on the left, under the barometer. The understairs door is in front of me, slightly ajar. I take a long, slow breath. I think about whether I have eaten enough today. I think about whether I am dehydrated. I think about whether the brown water from the tap was, in fact, safe to drink, and whether something in it has made me lightheaded. None of these explanations feel like the right shape, but I want to offer them to you, the person hearing this, because I want you to know I was trying to be sensible. I was trying to be a sensible woman alone in a dead woman's house, 90 minutes from the nearest hospital with no phone signal. I walk over and close the understairs door. The clack of the latch. I go back to the sitting room and I keep packing china. My hands are steady. I notice this with the small surprise of someone who expected her hands not to be. At 2:15, I have finished the dresser and I take the box of wrapped china out to the Yaris. I have to open the front door and walk down the path with the box held against my chest. The cold hits my face. The air outside smells of the hill. Wet bracken, sheep, wood smoke from somewhere. I open the boot of the car. I put the box in. I shut the boot. I look at the house from the gate. It looks exactly like it looked when I drove up. Stone, slate, 12-paned windows, dark green door slightly ajar where I left it. A perfectly ordinary house at the end of a perfectly ordinary path on a perfectly ordinary single-track road in the Welsh Hills. I think about getting in the car. I think about it for what must be 20 seconds. I have the keys in my hand. The decision is right there. I could get in the car and drive away and call the surveyor on Monday morning from a service station and say I was unwell and couldn't complete the job, and I could send someone else. And the someone else would be a man because the firm I sometimes subcontract to has all men except me, and they don't ask questions, and the house would be cleared by Wednesday, and the bank would have its survey, and nobody would ever know that I stood at the gate of my dead aunt's house at 2:15 on a Saturday in February with the keys in my hand and decided. I went back in. I want to be clear about why, because it matters, and because it's the part of the day I think about now. I went back in because I had 9 years of being a bad niece behind me, and Mare had been an old woman alone in a house for at least the last decade of her life. And I had a notion, soft and not entirely conscious, that walking out on her house 11 days after she died in it was the same shape of cowardice as not visiting her, and I had already committed that cowardice once. I went back in because of guilt. Just that ordinary thing. I want you to know it wasn't bravery. I want you to know it was a person trying to balance a small private ledger. I shut the front door behind me. I heard the latch catch. The hall was wrong again. Not mirrored this time. The dimensions were wrong. It was longer than it had been. The door to the kitchen at the end was further away than it should have been. Not by much. A few feet. The hallway had simply been extended, and the coat rack was at the end of it now rather than near the front, and the staircase rose further down. The proportions were patient and confident. Nothing looked stretched or distorted. It just looked like a slightly different hall, the way the hall of a neighbor's house is the same as yours but not. I want to describe what I felt in my body because the talking part of my brain went quiet for a second. There was a coldness that started at the back of my neck and went down between my shoulder blades. My mouth went dry in a specific way, the way it goes dry just before you're sick, although I wasn't sick. And the small, calm voice that has worked in dead people's houses for 6 years said, in the absence of any other voice, "Go to the kitchen and check the back door." That was the voice. That was all of it. Check the back door. I walked down the hall, which was the wrong length, and the walk took longer than it should have by maybe 2 seconds, which doesn't sound like much, but if you have ever walked down a hall in your own house in the dark, you know exactly how long that hall is, and these were 2 seconds I did not have a budget for. I reached the kitchen door. I went through. The kitchen was the kitchen. Belfast sink. Rayburn. Baby belling. Calendar. The window over the sink, looking out at the back garden, which sloped up to the stone wall, beyond which was the hill. The back door half glazed, with the key in the lock on the inside. I went to the back door. I turned the key. The key turned. I pushed the handle down. The door opened. It opened onto the hall. The same hall I had just walked down, on the coat rack at the end. The staircase rising. The front door with the dark green paint, visible at the far end of it. I was looking at the hallway from the kitchen door end as if I had never moved. There was no garden. There was no stone step. There was no coal bunker. There was the inside of the house, viewed through what should have been a door to the outside. I closed the back door. I turned the key the other way to lock it. I stood with my hand on the key. I did not scream. I want to be honest about this because it might sound like calm, and it wasn't calm. It was the absence of any available response. There was no procedure for this. There was no notebook category for this. Nothing in my 6 years had prepared me to react to a door opening onto the wrong side of the house it was attached to. My body did what a body does when there is no available response, which is to do nothing, and to feel the cold sweat running down the inside of my shirt, and to count its own breaths. I turned and looked at the window over the sink. The window showed the garden. The sloping garden, the stone wall, the hill, the bracken, the same gray light as before. The window was a window onto the outside, and the back door, 2 feet to the left of the window, was a door onto the inside. The wall they were both set in was the same wall. I turned the key in the back door again and pulled it open, slowly, an inch at a time. The hall through the doorway, the coat rack, the front door at the far end. I closed it. I locked it. I left the key in. I walked slowly back to the front door. The hall was its previous length now, or close to it. I do not know if it had returned to normal or if I was misjudging it, because my judgment was no longer dependable, and I want to say this clearly. This is the moment here, when I lost the ability to trust what I was measuring. From this point on in the afternoon, I cannot tell you for sure how long anything was or how far anything was from anything else. I can only tell you what I saw. I reached the front door. I put my hand on the handle. I pulled it down. I pulled. The door didn't move. I pulled harder. I pulled with both hands. The door was a wooden door in a stone frame, and it had opened easily 4 times that day. When I came in, when I went out for the boxes, when I went out for the china, when I came back in from the gate, it had a Yale lock and a mortise lock, and I had unlocked both of them with the brass key. Oh, and the brass key was in my jacket pocket, and the door was now stuck, or locked, or... I put my face close to the gap between the door and the frame, which is a narrow gap on an old stone house door, and I looked. There was no daylight through the gap. You know how, on any door to the outside, when you press your face close, you can see a thin line of light along the edge, the light from outside that gets through, even on a gray day. I have looked at this line 1,000 times in my life without thinking about it. It is the thing that tells you, on a level so deep you don't notice, that the door is a door to outside. There was no line. The gap between the door and the frame was dark. I stepped back. I stood in the hall with my hands hanging at my sides, and I looked at the front door, at the dark green paint, the fox knocker, the Yale, the mortise, and I understood, in the way you understand the thing you have been refusing to understand, that the front door was no longer a door. It was a wall in the shape of a door. The thing on the other side of it was no longer the path and the gate and the verge and the Yaris. The thing on the other side of it was the inside of the house, by some other route. I want to describe what I did next, because I am not proud of it, but it is what I did. I sat down. I sat down on the flagstone floor of the hall with my back against the wall, the south wall, the wall that should have had the road on the other side of it, and I put my hands over my mouth, and I let myself shake for a minute, just a minute. I counted it. I counted the seconds on my wristwatch because the watch was still working, and the watch was a thing I trusted. At the end of the minute, I took my hands away from my mouth, and I said, out loud, to nobody, all right? I said it the way you say it to a job. All right. Then I got up, and I went to find a window I could climb out of. The window in the sitting room was the obvious one. 12-paned sash, front of the house, looked out onto the garden where the hollyhock stalks were. I went into the sitting room. The carriage clock on the mantelpiece was ticking. I noticed, because I noticed these things, that the photograph of the 2 women on the beach, the one I had looked at this morning, was no longer on the piano. The frame was there, but the photograph in the frame was different. It was a photograph of Mare, alone, in front of this house, taken from the gate, with the green door behind her. The photograph was old. The colors were 1980s colors. The light in the photograph was the same low-gray light that was outside the windows now. Mare was looking directly at the camera, with her hands clasped in front of her, and she was smiling in a way that suggested she did not particularly want to be photographed. I did not stop to think about this. I noted it. I added it to the running list in my head of things I would deal with after I got out. I went to the window. The window had a brass latch. I undid it. The bottom sash should slide upward. It didn't slide. I tried to slide it harder. I put the heel of my hand against the wooden frame, and I pushed. It didn't move. I looked at the wood around the sash for paint sealing it shut, the way old sash windows sometimes get painted into their frames by lazy decorators, and I couldn't see any. The sash was simply not moving. I tapped the glass, and the glass tapped back at me with the exact small sound glass makes. I looked through it. The garden outside was the garden. The hollyhocks, the hedge, the gate, the Yaris on the verge. I could see the Yaris. I could see my own car. I could see my own breath fogging the inside of the glass. I picked up a brass candlestick from the mantelpiece, and I broke the window. It made the noise I expected it to make. The pane I hit shattered and fell out, partly inward onto the carpet, partly outward onto the path. Cold air rushed in. The smell of wet bracken and wood smoke rushed in. The garden was there, the path was there, the gate, the car. I had broken a way out. I put my arm through the broken pane to feel the air on the outside. My arm came out the other side of the wall. I felt, and this is the part I keep coming back to. I felt my own hand on my own back. From the inside of the hall, my hand had gone through what should have been the window of the sitting room and come out through the south wall of the hall 6 feet behind me, and I was feeling, with my outstretched fingers, the small of my own back through the fabric of my shirt. I withdrew my arm. I looked at the window. The glass was broken. The garden was visible. The cold air was coming in. I turned and looked at the south wall of the hall. There was no hole. There was no broken pane in the stone. The wall was intact. The wall had received my hand and let it through without breaking and put it on my own back. I sat down on the floor of the sitting room because my legs had decided, without me, that sitting was what I was going to do. The carriage clock ticked. The cold air came in through the broken window. The hollyhocks moved slightly in a breeze I could see but not feel. I thought about Mare. I thought about Mare finding her dressing gown cord on the wrong hook in the morning. I thought about Mare noticing that the door to the cupboard under the stairs had opened by itself. I thought about Mare coming downstairs one morning and finding the hall a slightly different length and standing in it for a moment and then making her toast. I thought about Mare, 67 years old, alone in this house for the last decade, and I thought, and the thought arrived complete, the way some thoughts do, with no edges I could pick at. This had been happening to her for years, and she hadn't told anyone because she didn't want anyone to think she was losing her mind, and she had learned to live inside it, and that was the version of it I would have inherited if I had been a better niece. And the house has been waiting 11 days for the inheritor, and the inheritor is me. I want to say I screamed. I didn't scream. I want to say I prayed. I didn't pray. What I did, sitting on the floor of my dead aunt's sitting room, with a broken window, letting in air I could not walk out through, was I started to cry, and the crying was not the panicked crying of a woman in danger. It was the crying of a woman who has understood very late what her aunt's life had been, and what the silence between them had cost, and that the silence was now in the room with her, attentive, and would not let her leave until something had been transacted. I cried for, I think, about 3 or 4 minutes. All of the carriage clock kept ticking. The cold air kept coming in. The house was quiet in a way that was not the quiet of an empty house. It was the quiet of a room with another person in it who is being kind enough not to speak. When I stopped crying, I got up. I wiped my face on my sleeve. I walked back to the hall. The barometer was on the left wall. The coat rack was on the right. The hall was the right length. The understairs door was closed. The front door, dark green, was at the end of the hall with its fox knocker on the outside, and through the small gap at the bottom of the door I could see, now, a thin line of gray winter daylight. I walked to the door. I put my hand on the handle. The handle turned. The door opened. The garden was there. The path. The gate. The Yaris. The hedge. The smell of wet bracken and wood smoke. The hill rising beyond the road. The gray sky. I walked out. I did not run. I walked down the flagstone path 1 careful step at a time, and I lifted the gate on its hinges, and I closed it behind me, and I got into the Yaris, and I sat in the driver's seat with the door closed, and I locked the doors. I sat there for a long time. I do not know how long. My watch said it was 20 past 3 when I started the engine. I drove home. I drove 90 minutes south, then east, and the signal came back on the A483, and my phone vibrated for 40 seconds with all the messages it had been holding, and my partner had texted 3 times asking how it was going, and I didn't answer until I was on the M4 because I didn't trust my voice yet. I got home. I had a bath. I ate a meal. I went to bed. Of the next morning, I called the firm I subcontract to, and I told them I had been taken ill and I needed someone else to do the landlord job. They sent Dave. Dave is a man in his 50s who does not ask questions. Dave was in and out in 2 days, and the surveyor came on Tuesday, and the bank put the house on the market on the Friday, and it sold within 6 weeks to a couple from Birmingham who were retiring early. I have not been back. I will never go back. My mother asked me about the clearance, and I told her it was fine, and that I had brought the photographs and the address book and the postcard from Bethan, and I gave them to her, and she cried over them in the way you cry over a sister-in-law you weren't close to, and that was that, and it has been a year almost. I am writing this because something happened on Thursday. I came home from a job in Newport, an ordinary job, a small terrace, an old man whose son lives in Australia, and I parked the van on our road, and I walked up to our front door, which is a blue door, a normal blue door, in the front of a 1930s semi in a suburb of Cardiff that has nothing to do with stone or hills or Welsh slate. I put my key in the lock. I turned it. I opened the door. The hall was the wrong length. Not by much. Maybe 2 feet. The coat rack was further down than it should have been. The doormat was further down than it should have been. The stairs rose at a point on the right-hand wall that was not where they had risen yesterday. I stood on the doormat with my key in my hand, and I felt the cold start at the back of my neck and go down between my shoulder blades. On the small, calm voice that has worked in dead people's houses for 7 years now said, in the absence of any other voice, "Take off your shoes and go to the kitchen and put the kettle on." I did. I am sitting in the kitchen now. The kettle has boiled. I have made tea. My partner is at his mother's until Sunday. The house is quiet in a way that is not the quiet of an empty house. The carriage clock on our mantelpiece is ticking. We don't have a carriage clock. We have never had a carriage clock. The clock is in the sitting room behind me, and I can hear it. And I am not going to turn around and look at it, because I know what it looks like. I know what color the brass is. I know what time it is stopped at when it stops, which will be soon. I know the smile on the photograph that will be on the mantelpiece beside it when I go in there, eventually, and I know the dark green of the door it will be standing in front of, and I know whose hands are clasped in front of her, and I know who is looking back at the camera, and I am not running, and I am not screaming, and there is something I want to say very clearly before I finish writing this and put down the pen. I want to say that I understand now what my Aunt Mare did for 10 years on her own in a stone house above Lanarded Wells. I want to say I'm sorry I never came. I want to say that the kindness of it, and there is a kindness in it, I have to tell you that even though I know how it sounds, is that you are not alone in the house, ever. And the house is patient, and the house remembers you. And the house was waiting 11 days for someone to come back inside it, and I was the one who came. And the front door of my own house tonight is the dark green door now, even though when I look at it directly, it is still blue. And the fox knocker is hanging slightly off true. And the smell in the hall, very faint, underneath everything else, is lavender and damp wool. And the warm, starchy smell of leek and potato soup just past the point of starting to cook. And my hands on the table are cold, the way her hands always were. I am going to finish my tea. I am going to go and look at the photograph on the mantelpiece. And then I am going to do what she did for 10 years, which is to live inside it. Because the alternative, I see it now, I see it clearly, is to leave and to make someone else come and find me 11 days from now on the kitchen floor and to leave the house waiting. Again. For the next one in the family to walk through the door with a set of keys and a notebook, and the small private guilt of not having visited often enough. I won't do that to my sister. I won't do that to her daughter, who is 8, and who I love. The hall is the right length again. The kettle has cooled. I'm going in to look at the photograph now.